Well, ho, 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 here we go. It's the Fantasy Champion Show. Nick Anastos, Bob Morin, and it's the playoffs, Bob. Week number 16. Welcome back inside the show. We got the holiday beards going. 'Tis the season. Let's just jump into the show. How about a predictions we'll do predictions later. We'll go start 'em, sit 'em as we usually do. And we'll start it with some shout-outs. Des Bryant came through for the Cowboys. I was a big hype man of his, so to speak, last week. You had your doubts. Des Bryant proved Bob wrong, and Bob, being a man of his word, I suppose, wants to give a shout-out to Des Bryant.
He didn't prove me wrong, though, because I ended up starting him in that league I was talking about. But on the show, I was skeptical as it went forward, though. I did say I wanted to hear more stuff, and I did. I played him. He did well. I wanted to say I should have never doubted him. So
that's correct.
He deserves a shout-out. He had a decent game where he had like 11 or 12 points. He had a touchdown. So
then a surprising shout-out as well to Josh Freeman.
Yeah, I was just happy he kind of laid an egg last week. It was good to see in the playoffs some people starting him and burned him. So, well, especially his receivers around him too. Vincent Jackson, he had an all right game, but I know Mike Williams didn't have a real good game, and those guys are guys that are starting, in the leagues.
So you're glad that fantasy owners across the country suffered because of Josh Freeman.
Yeah, because the guy I played had Mike Williams, and he clearly struggled because Freeman had an awful day. So.
All right, here we go. Start 'em, sit 'em. Let's start with the quarterbacks. This week, the return of RG3 for the Redskins, taking on Philadelphia in Philadelphia. And he's not the consensus number one, but a lot of fantasy experts like what they see, including myself. How can you bet against RG3, first of all, based on what he's done? And secondly, he's taking on a struggling Philadelphia defense. I think that, yes, he may not be 100% in terms of health-wise, but he doesn't need to be to produce at a high level at championship time. Green light easy with RG3.
Yeah, I wouldn't have any doubts. Last week, if you're still alive and had RG3 as your starter, I would roll with him. Just go with him. A cupcake of a matchup, I feel. And maybe he might not be able to run as well, but I still think he'll be able to pass. And against that defense, it's a no-brainer.
He's the third highest player, projection-wise.
I don't believe that, though. That's
in ESPN standard.
I don't agree on that one.
Tony Romo is a guy you do agree with, taking on New Orleans, another team that has struggled against the pass.
Yeah, and Des Bryant looked like he had no real ill effects. Austin was getting targeted a lot. He had a decent game. So I think against New Orleans, everyone loves to play New Orleans, especially in the championship game.
All right, what if you need take a shot at quarterback, a high reward, low risk kind of guy? Who do you like?
For high
quarterbacks.
High risk, low.
If you're an underdog, you need to take a shot. Give me a name that is not an automatic starter that you think could come through.
I'd have to. I don't know. I know Brandon Weeden has done really well this year. He's not a guy I would start, but he's a guy that has put up 300 yards pretty. Consistently lately. So, he's been a guy who's been all right. Josh Gordon obviously can break that big catch and run with his speed. So, I'm not saying start him, but he's a guy that, could fly under the radar. To answer your question.
Here's a name for you, Sam Bradford.
Yeah, he's been doing well, too.
Bob, you drafted him in a dynasty league. You let him go.
I like him, though, still. I traded him. Fair game. I didn't let him go, but I got something in return.
He had a season-high 27 fantasy points in week number 15.
That's probably a career high.
Probably a juicy matchup as well against Tampa Bay. They have allowed the most points to opposing quarterbacks fantasy-wise all season.
Yeah, and I think his receivers are coming along, and Steven Jackson's running the ball well. So, what's not to like in St. Louis right now? Like I said, the receivers, though, Gibson I really like, and Amendola have been playing really well.
All right, sits. Andy Dalton, a name that Bob has praised.
I praised him. Yeah.
Usually. He's usually a must-start in Bob's eyes, but you say sit this week, even with the championship potentially on the line.
You got the matchup to look at. Pittsburgh against the pass has been great this year, and I just don't think Cincinnati can beat Pittsburgh. It's in Pittsburgh. I don't think it's going to happen this week. If I was a betting man, I was going to take Pittsburgh this week.
But Pittsburgh last week had two of their top three corners out, and you saw what Tony Romo was able to do.
Doesn't matter. I think Cincinnati, I think Dallas, I like Dallas with their complement of receivers versus Cincinnati only having A.J. Green.
I'm just playing devil's advocate.
I know you are.
I agree. I think that game is going to have the black and blue tone of a war in the trenches. When you talk about the Steelers, you talk about Cincinnati, two of the more physical teams, especially in December outdoors at Heinz Field. Probably a lot of ground and pound both ways.
You know, the Steelers have more of the experience in these type of games, so that will really show tomorrow. Being Week 16 in the NFL, it's a huge week.
Yep.
A lot of pressure.
All right, let's look at the stable. Running backs. Running backs, we both agree that we'd like Stephen Ridley. Pats taking on Jacksonville. Jacksonville, weak defensively, to say the least, against the run. I think New England throws early in the first half, builds a lead, and then really milks the ground game in the second half. Stephen Ridley did fumble last week, but if you watch the game, you know it was sloppy conditions outside, 2 fumbles, wet pigskin. Obviously, he paid the price, I think, late in the game when Danny Woodhead got the majority of the work down the stretch. But I think Ridley is back in the lineup and is producing, especially in the second half, and is a must-start, I think, at running back.
Yeah, I think that's the only problem I have with Ridley right now is that he could be in the doghouse, and we all know how Belichick is with the backs. Will he, even see the first half? I know the second half he'll do well, but is there going to be any type of
other
discipline or anything?
Well, with that,
maybe Vereen could step up, but he's not worth starting.
Woodhead,
I think Woodhead again, but Woodhead we always see when the Patriots are either losing or someone's fumbled, and last week Vereen fumbled and Ridley fumbled, so Woodhead was getting more carries, but it's just always scary when a running back comes off a bad week and what Belichick's going to do. You never know.
All right,
hesitating a little bit.
Reggie Bush, we've been debating this one all week. Dolphins against the Bills, round 2. Round 1 went to Buffalo. Reggie Bush was shut down, 8 yards on the ground on 8 carries, but you like him to bounce back in round 2.
Yeah, I think he's going to get more opportunity this week. I think the carries are going to be there. Daniel Thomas is out. So I just feel that he's going to get more than 8 touches.
Yeah.
And last week, Seattle, killed Buffalo. Even in the first half when the game was still tight, Marshawn Lynch had, 15 points in the first quarter. So I know Marshawn Lynch and we're not comparing
to Bush, I would hope.
I'm just comparing the situation, okay?
Okay.
Definitely would never do that because I don't like Reggie Bush at all. But I think this week, if you need to play him, he's an option to have.
All right, this is the Fantasy Champion Show, week number 16, the Christmas special, if you will. Happy holidays to you and yours. Week 16, Saturday night game, and then a full slate, so to speak, of Sunday games. No Monday night games this week, no Thursday night games either. All right, wide receivers we like. Cecil Shorts, talking about the New England Patriots Jacksonville matchup. Shorts, first of all, he's back from concussion. Secondly, he's been a superb deep threat the majority of the year. Third, under Chad Henne, the Jaguars are throwing deeper than most teams in the NFL. And then fourth, New England has been vulnerable to the big pass, especially in the middle of the field. I think a home run hitter like Cecil Shorts is a perfect play this week at a flex or a wide receiver number 2.
Yeah, I love Cecil Shorts in general as an every week receiver. He's been very consistent since the beginning of the season. Last week, even his first week back from injury, he had over 100 yards, barely over 100 yards. But this week, I feel that Pats are going to be up, and they're just going to be airing the ball out. And Henne and him have had a great connection, and could be good things. I could see him having at least a touchdown and 100 yards tomorrow.
All right, just a quick side note. I know we talked about quarterbacks earlier in the show, but Chad Henne, what do you expect he will do against New England?
I think he should have a good game.
Is he a desperation start?
Oh, he would be one of those guys. Actually, that would be a great answer to the question you asked early in the show. I think he would be one of those guys when you said high risk.
Oh, yeah.
Henne would be perfect in this situation. I think I could easily see him having over 300 yards. I could see Jacksonville scoring tomorrow.
He's projected at 308 by ESPN, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks.
See what happens. I'm curious to see if the New England defense is going to get a pick 6 tomorrow. That could be the factor. I think New England will win by a couple touchdowns.
All right, here's a guy that disappointed some fantasy owners, probably at the flex, was Anquan Boldin, who had been playing better for Baltimore, but laid a goose egg against Peyton Manning. A lot of goose eggs last week. Boldin wasn't the only one. Denaro Alexander was a guy
Roddy White had 1.6.
We had praised, right, 1.8. I think he had 18 yards,
yeah,
Roddy White. So week 15 in general was a little bit of a surprising week from that standpoint. But I think one of those guys that can bounce back is Anquan Boldin. I think that, the Giants' secondary is the weak link. I know overall the Giants are up and down, but that secondary I think has been more down than up. And I think Anquan Boldin, although the Ravens did figure out how to pass late in that game. It was over at halftime against Denver, but they threw a little bit better in the second half. But Anquan was shut out. I think that they look for him early and often. He's still their targets leader. I know Smith and his big playability is there, but I think this game against the Giants will have a little bit more of a controlled feel. They'll run him for possession routes, 10 yards on the sideline, little comeback routes that they use him for because he's big and strong, and he's a red zone threat.
I don't think so, though.
I'm telling you, I think a good flex play, if you need one, is Anquan Boldin.
Yeah, I just don't buy it just because I don't think that offense is on the same page right now. I see them trying to get Ray Rice more involved tomorrow. Obviously, last week was...
Yeah, he definitely needs to get more
involved. He will get more involved. I think that's going to be the number one priority. I don't see Boldin having a big day, but, I could be wrong. I see Pitta doing better and Torrey Smith.
All right, one guy we agree on, Michael Crabtree. He's been putting on a show lately. New England fans, unfortunately, saw what he could do last week, scored the game-winning score. But he's been good long before last week.
Quietly good, though.
Right, really start to fulfill that potential that was talked about so much when he was first drafted 4 years ago. I think he's arrived. The Niners are going to have a challenge, I think, moving the ball consistently against Seattle on Sunday night. But I think both teams will need to rely on one of their big wide receivers, whether it's Seattle with Sidney Rice. That might not be too bad of a play. Or on the other side, San Francisco with Crabtree. Either way, Crabtree, green light this week to start.
Well, I think the best thing I've seen is his quarterback, Kaepernick, and him have a good chemistry, a good thing going. But like you said, he has been doing this all year, pretty much, on and off. He's been most consistent this year out of any of his years he's been in the league, put it that way. So I think it's time now to feel confident to put him in. I'm sure you've played him the past few weeks. So
I could see 65 in a touch.
Stick with him. Yeah, I could see that too. And if he has a big play, it could be a 16-point game.
Yep. This is the Fantasy Champions Show, Holiday Edition, Playoff Special, Championship Special in most leagues across the United States and across the world. Let's take a look at the tight ends. Keith Miller, another guy you like, referred earlier to the black and blue type of game we expect to see between Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. I think Keith Miller fits right into that kind of a game. Yeah,
I just see Keith Miller written all over it. Him having last week had a great game. Their first meeting, he scored a touchdown and had like 60 yards. So we know he's been one of Big Ben's favorite targets this year. He probably has been his favorite target, actually.
Yeah.
He's having actually a career year. So I would stick with him if you're not already starting him. Feel confident.
All right, Kyle, I like Kyle Rudolph with the Vikings taking on Houston. I like Houston to win the game, but Rudolph, surprisingly, he's only owned by a little more than 50%.
He's been inconsistent, I feel. He has had some good games, but he's had some games where
he's ranked 11th among tight ends
in the middle
in the ESPN league. But on the upswing, I think, and more importantly, Houston, if there's going to be a weakness, Bob, excuse me, there's going to be a weakness with that defense. It's through the air, one, and two, it's probably in the middle of the field, similar to the Patriots. Tight ends have had success. Fantasy tight ends have found fantasy success and real-world success, I suppose, against Houston. And I think Rudolph, who's been better later. What'd I say, Houston?
Yeah, I like to say Houston.
Oh, so you dropped the H?
Yeah. I don't. I make
That's
fun
the
of,
Bob Morin accent?
No, I just make fun of people that do because I think it's funny. It's Houston.
All right.
But no, I feel that...
you don't like Rudolph, though?
No, I think Rudolph's all right. I think it's a valid point because they are going to be down, and I think there'll be opportunities there, and there's not really anybody else to throw to. So I feel if anyone's going to have a good game out of the wide receivers / tight ends in Minnesota, it's going to be him.
All right. Do you have a sit for me at tight end?
Sit for
a guy to completely avoid in Week 16.
I'd say you might want to avoid Owen Daniels.
In that same game.
In that same game, because I just feel like he hasn't been that healthy, I don't think, since that injury he suffered a few weeks back. I don't think he's 100% yet. And the playoffs coming, if this game's a blowout, he could hurt you. He might end up with 4 or 5 points. So.
All right. To update our bet, we do not have the exact score, but we have a feeling that I'm winning.
We didn't say that.
Going into the final week.
We didn't say that, though.
Well, everybody up and down my roster pretty much performed.
Same with me.
I have a hard time figuring that I'm
Same with me. I had Tom Brady and Aaron Hernandez. They hooked up. They had good games.
We had a draft last week where we just had a quick snake draft of a kind of a dummy hand, so to speak.
Yeah.
9-player positions. But this week also in our consolation bracket.
For 5th place.
For the teams that didn't make the playoffs.
The NIT.
The NIT, so to speak, the JV tournament. Bob and I are squaring off for the third time this year.
Yeah, we're 1-1.
And Bob does not feel very good about going up against my unit after they outscored basically everybody except for one team last week.
I don't think you should lie.
That's worth.
You shouldn't lie this time of year around the holidays like this. It's not.
What I've been spitting facts.
I haven't been saying anything though about you winning or scared or anything. So, yeah, I think it's gonna be a good game. But my team's better than yours. Obviously, I finished better in the regular season.
Yeah, well, my team's hotter. So.
Well, we'll see who gets the Christmas present.
Yeah, we will. So we'll have two bets kind of going head-to-head next week.
Yeah.
Just in time for New Year's, so to speak. All right, good luck in your championship rounds, if indeed you are playing in the championship. And we'll be back next week for the Week 17 edition, and maybe look ahead to the playoffs, too, talking about the office pools, and we'll give you some strategy with that as well.
We'll also kind of touch on what to do in the playoffs. You know, watch players, get ready for 2013, kind of give you some strategy, kind of what we do in the offseason to prepare.
This is an important time of year for fantasy owners, even if you are out of the playoffs and out of the mix. There's always scouting going on.
You're never out of it, because there's always next season.
That's correct. You want to be a real GM, you got to do what real GMs do.
Around the clock.
That's correct. For MC the Brick, Bob Morin, I'm Nick Anastos, saying so long, good luck, and we will see you next week.
Merry Christmas. Nice. As I knock the camera down. You should have came in the screen.
I should have ran it back and spiked it.